My name is Christina Gauthier. I am the Public Relations Specialist for Para's Albuquerque office. And either myself or Tricia Thaxton greeted you at the door. Tricia is our liaison officer out of Para's Santa Fe office. And we have the pleasure today of coming out and teaching you how retirement works. You all have a specialty day-to-day in your job, and we want you to have that specialty no matter what it is. But our specialty is retirement. And part of our position and responsibility with the state is to come out and teach you in terms that are English how this all works. I can guarantee none of us came to work for the state, city, county, housing authority, wherever we work, for high-paying salaries. The majority of us have come to work for a government entity because of the really great benefits. And I always joke that Para is one of the few things the state has ever done right, and it's because our retirement is ranked top 3 in the nation. I have friends and family spread all over the United States, and I'm pretty sure they're sick of me because whenever I travel to see them or they come to see us here in New Mexico, I always ask them about their retirement. How has it changed? And we have family in Vermont, and they now have a 40-year working minimum requirement for retirement eligibility. And so the changes Para experienced in 2013 are all covered in the green and the purple handbooks, and we're going to go over those in some detail, but I always think it could be worse. We are very, very blessed to have such a really great retirement from New Mexico. So we're going to get started. I'm going to keep you abreast of which pages I'm covering, and the pages will be the same in both the green book and the purple book until I get to about page 16, and then I'll be sure to stay on top of the page numbers for you. So I'm only going to hold up the green book because I'm not an octopus. I don't have multiple hands, more than 2, even though I'm a mom and I'm expected to. So officially on the inside cover, a really happy face is going to greet you. And his name is Wayne Probst. He is our executive director. And I actually aspire to be him because he is a truly dynamic public speaker. I actually listen to him when he goes and presents at the legislature on Para's behalf, and he's, you know, a really dynamic speaker and very, very nice and super soft-spoken. If you met him on the street, you probably wouldn't even recognize him because he's just so soft-spoken, and very few people know what he looks like except for all of you now. And so, inside you will find a table of contents, but on page 5, you will find the map to Para's Santa Fe office. If you make it that far north, the Santa Fe office is off of the Cerrillos Road exit, next to the Outlet Mall, across the street from the Santa Fe Printing Press, and the building has won a ton of awards. It is green by all standards. Lots of the staff like to call it the fishbowl because there are a lot of glass walls and rammed earth, and it's really, truly beautiful. If you ever have the opportunity to go up north, you are always welcome to stop in and pay that office a visit. The Para's Albuquerque office map is on page 6. That is currently where I am housed. The Albuquerque office actually has a reception area that can seat 7 people. So if you all show up on the same day and the same time, some of you are going to be waiting out in the hall and in the break room in the basement. And so the office meets with members on a walk-in, first-come, first-served basis, and we know you're not all going to make the same trip on the same day, but we do encourage you to observe our closure at the lunch hour. We are closed daily from noon to 1, and that's strictly because when I'm traveling, there are only 3 staff members left to assist our customers, and so we want to help you and give you the best customer service possible. So if you're going to make the trip up, drive up in the morning, have some lunch, and then meet us at 1 o'clock when we unlock the doors. There are email addresses on both page 5 and page 6. Tricia answers the email address on page 5, Para-Member Services. I answer the email on page 6, Para-Albuquerque. And so the only time you generally are not going to get a response is when we are presenting or when we are off. So it's not a 24-hour manned kind of deal. It's Monday through Friday, generally 8 to 5. And so we are happy to assist you with your inquiries. But I'm actually going to encourage you all today to ask your questions out loud here. I know we think all of our stuff is really private and personal, but I bet you money someone else in the room has the same question you do. So that's how to reach us. On page 7, we talk about PERA's history. PERA was adopted as the state's retirement plan in 1947. Way back in the day, long before many of us were born. And so since that time, PERA has grown to encompass over 30 different retirement plans, which we administer, and Tricia and I have to have memorized in this vaults up here. And so it's a lot of fun. The good news is you only have to know about your specific retirement plan. Para is a defined benefit plan, a 401A as an apple by IRS codes. Many of us have held other jobs where we have 401Ks. There are a big difference between the two types of plans. A 401K is just a bucket of money you and your employer contribute to, and when you have received all of those benefits, you get a thank you for participating in our plan letter. With the 401A as an apple, which is what Para is, you get a once-a-month lifetime pension benefit regardless of the balance in your bucket. And so that's why I say this is one of the few things New Mexico got right, because many of us are living longer into retirement, and it would be really awful to get a letter in your late 70s, early 80s that says, I'm really sorry, you're out of money. So that is not going to happen with us. We're going to pay you once a month for the rest of your lifetime, even if you live to be 120. All right. Para is governed by a board of 12 members. We do have some that are elected by the votes that are generally coming up here in November. The Secretary of State, the Treasurer, those positions are elected by all of the voters in New Mexico, and they do have a seat on our board. The rest of those seats belong to us, the members. State employees vote for the state representatives. City members vote for the municipal representative. County members vote for the county representative. And we even have a few retiree seats. So your vote doesn't stop counting. Once you retire, you actually have representatives on Para's board, and they are always eager to hear from you. On page 8, we talk about the new benefit tiers. The page that was between the handbooks on the back table actually told you which of the books pertain to your situation. If you picked up a green book, you were a PERA member on June 30th of 2013, which means you were either actively employed with a para-related agency, or you were not actively employed, but you had a bucket of contributions and service credit on account that had not been refunded, or you had already been retired with PERA. Forever, for the rest of your lifetime, if one of those 3 criteria apply to you, you will be Tier 1. Even if you stop working tomorrow and you don't come back to work ever again, if you were Tier 1 on June 30th of 2013, you are forever Tier 1. Nothing can change that. Tier 2 members are those individuals who came to work for the very first time with a para-related agency on or after July 1st of 2013, or those individuals who did not receive the words of wisdom I received when I left my first para-related employer and took a refund of their bucket of contributions and service credit and had a 0 balance on June 30th and then returned to work July 1st of 13 or later. So those 2 qualifications make members Tier 2, and so we'll explain how the differences in the plan exist as we progress through this presentation. At the bottom of page 8, there's something that's very important to cover now, particularly because annual member statements are starting to hit mailboxes. Tricia is already starting to get emails to the member services inbox, and so lots of members come to us and they say, well, my annual member statement does not reflect the time that I worked prior to now. And so a lot of times members don't realize that when they first hire on with a para-related agency, that the position they were hired into was actually excludable under the law. My very first para-related position was actually a student intern. I was attending the University of New Mexico, and I was interning at the city of Albuquerque. Those 2 semesters that I interned with the city of Albuquerque will never count for para's purposes because I was excludable as a student intern. Members whose very first job with a para-related agency was as one of those summer hires who helped with the Parks and Rec program, or you were a lifeguard, and that position only lasted during the summer months, you officially were excludable from membership because you were a seasonal employee. And so there are lots of reasons a member can be excluded, including part-time status less than 20 hours. So when you're looking at your annual member statement, please keep in mind all of your employment may not be para-eligible. And, you know, Tricia and I can confirm whether or not we have an exclusion form in your file, so we'd be happy to help with that. On the top of page 9, we talk about your para ID number. Now that annual member statements have gone out in the mail, you are going to get a statement in the mail which presumably has your para ID number in the upper right-hand corner of the first page. We're all going to leave here today, check our mailboxes, and then run out and have our para IDs tattooed right here, right? No, we don't want you to do that. We do want you to use that number whenever you email us. Without fail, at least 2 times a day, Tricia and I get an email with somebody's full Social Security number. Do not ever do that with anyone, anywhere, whether it's retirement related or not. Para only needs the last 4 digits of your social or your date of birth, preferably your Para ID number. So if you're making an inquiry by email about your member statement, refer to the Para ID number on that statement. Additionally, if you're going to fill out a form for us, whether it's a request or to update your beneficiary or it's your true retirement packet, we want you to use your Para ID number for your protection. All right, so I've already talked a little bit about those annual member statements. We're on to page 9 in both the purple and the green book. And so that annual member statement has multiple pages. Of course, I haven't seen mine this year because it got mailed out when Tricia and I were on the road. But last year's statement on the first page showed you your service credit for one period in time. And so it was one fiscal year, July 1st of 2013 to June 30th of 2014. And so members who were not employed from July 1st of 2013 to June of 2014 are going to get an annual member statement reflecting 0 service credit. That's very rare. Most of us in this room are actively employed with the para-related agency, and we know we met the minimum service credit requirements, so our annual member statement should show that we have a solid year's worth of service credit on that first page. If it says anything else, now, right now, not immediately right now because we're in a presentation, but this week, in the next week or two, this would be the time to contact us and let us know, hey, there's a hiccup in my file. Can you help me identify it? And we can. The thing is, we might not be able to help you fix it. You're going to have to go back either to your check stubs or to your employer's payroll division and ask them why the required number of hours were not reported. The ironic thing is, sometimes you actually know the answer before you have to get that far. Sometimes you've taken leave without pay, or you were injured on the job, or you took some family medical leave, and so we'll talk about service credit requirements in more detail, but the annual member statement's an important tool in your retirement planning. And every year when we send them to you, we actually expect you to open them up and look at them instead of shove them in a drawer, which we know happens a lot. That's okay though. Online self-service on the bottom portion of page 9 actually tells you that you have the ability to create an online account whereby you can view your service credit to date. You can view your account contributions. You can view your beneficiary information. You can view your mailing address and phone number and email address. And so lots of members don't use this feature. And I haven't quite figured out why, because the majority of us are carrying around a smartphone. That smartphone gives us instant access to the internet, and so if you needed information about your retirement account, instead of waiting for Monday through Friday, for an answer, you absolutely can log in at any hour of the day and look at your retirement account. And so we encourage you to create that account if you have the opportunity. I will tell you this though, when you are getting ready to retire, that tool is going to be very beneficial for you because it actually gives you the ability to estimate your benefits. If you're interested in purchasing airtime, that particular feature also lets you calculate an estimate for the cost of airtime. And so there are some really great features built into the self-service site that unfortunately are going underused. When you retire, your self-service account transitions with you. The important note about that is if you're creating your self-service account with your employer's email address, before you retire, you actually have to take the time to update that email address to a personal email address, because if you lock yourself out of that account, you're not going to get that reset password email that would be coming your way. So if you've already created your self-service account, thank you. If you have not created that account with your personal email address, write yourself a note now to make a modification to your file to have a personal address by the time you retire. One last note, due to an audit finding sometime last year, our self-service accounts underwent a minor modification. If you don't log into your self-service account every 120 days or so, your password's going to expire, and then you're going to have to use that reset password feature or call or email us. So I thought I'd give you the heads up because this is going to not be surprising at all, I'm sure, because communication is challenging in every agency. Tricia and I heard about the passwords expiring after 120 days about 2 months after they made the change. So yeah, it happens everywhere, but now you know, and now you can log in more regularly and keep your account active. All right, on to page 10. So Between the green book and the purple book, there is going to be some slightly different information on page 10. If you have a green book, you are a vested member of PERA after you've completed 5 years of service credit. If you have a purple book, there are 2 qualifications for vesting. If you are a civilian, you're not police, you're not fire, you're not corrections, your vesting period is officially 8 years if you have the purple book. If you are police, fire, or corrections and you have the purple book, your vesting period is now 6 years, and that's for Tier 2 members. Everyone with the green book is 5 years. Tier 2 has a different vesting based on the position you currently fill. On page 11, we talk about beneficiary information, and the information's the same in both handbooks. And so I will tell you a funny, semi-related story. When I went to work for the city of Albuquerque after I finished up at UNM and I applied for a permanent position, I sat down with the HR ladies through new employee orientation, and they pulled me aside on a break. And they said, Christina, do not name your boyfriend as your beneficiary. And all I could think was, he's cute, he's sweet, he's nice. Why would I never want to do that? Except that I work for PERA now. I absolutely understand what they were trying to do for me. It doesn't mean that you can't name your significant other of right now. It just means the second that person's name starts with the word X, you need to run into your HR person's office and fill out a new form. Because heaven forbid something happens to you and you pass away before you update that form, your ex is going to get all of your hard-earned retirement benefits potentially. And so I'm not saying don't name your significant other. I'm saying be really, really secure in your choice. Make sure you are naming someone who will honor your wishes with those retirement benefits if something happens to you. For members who have not filled out a beneficiary form in a while, PERA's new beneficiary form is pretty awesome. It no longer requires notarization, and you can actually designate both types of PERA beneficiaries on one form. Officially, PERA has 2 types of beneficiaries. The first is a refund beneficiary. The refund beneficiary, just as the name implies, is eligible to receive a one-time lump sum refund of your bucket of contributions if you were to pass away before you vest. And so that person gets the one-time lump sum, a condolence letter, no additional payments are made. When you are vested in PERA's plan, or if your death is duty-related, regardless of where you are in your career, your survivor beneficiary comes into play. And your survivor beneficiary, the one person you name as your survivor, is eligible to receive a lifetime pension payment in your name. Big deal, right? So I listened to those wise women in HR. I named my mom as my beneficiary, and then that boyfriend eventually proposed, and now we are married. And by default, and by law, he is now my beneficiary. So if you started out at the beginning of your career and you named someone other than the person you're married to now, PERA is going to pay the person you're married to now whether or not you update that form. And so it's really important to make sure your beneficiary designations are up to date. The files that Tricia and I audited for this afternoon's meeting, we have a good handful of those folks who will be filling out beneficiary forms for us this afternoon. So bring your writing pen if you're scheduled for this afternoon, because your hand might hurt a little bit. You have to fill out some forms. So, yes?
Did you say regardless of whose name was on the beneficiary, the spouse will automatically get it?
So the question is, clarification on a statement that I made. If you named somebody other than your spouse at the time you hired and you are now married, is it true that your spouse will receive the payment? And the staff in PERA's offices love this answer, and it depends. It depends upon the paperwork in your file. If you got your spouse's notarized written permission to name someone other than him or her as your beneficiary, we will pay whichever beneficiary has been designated with the spousal consent. But if I were to pass away and I didn't change my beneficiary from my mom to my husband, and I didn't get permission to name my mom as my beneficiary, and I were to pass away before retirement, PERA is going to pay my husband. So if you want someone other than your spouse as your beneficiary, you have to fill out the appropriate notarized form to make someone other than your spouse your beneficiary. Yes?
So if we haven't filled out nothing, then just we're assuming that it's scheduled or a spouse is not aware of it.
Ooh, so the question is, if I haven't filled out any paperwork, is it correct to assume that it's just going to go to my spouse? We never make assumptions. We always prefer that your paperwork is in order because we don't always know when a member passes away. Normally, families are really great about calling us up and saying, so-and-so passed away, I need to report their passing. But oftentimes, we hear from Social Security that one of our members has passed away before the families know to contact us. And so in your estate planning, and all of us should do it, you should have a packet of paperwork that reflects what you, where a person needs to call in the event of your passing, and all of the appropriate paperwork associated with that. So you can make that assumption, but it's going to be very challenging for your loved ones to try to figure out who needs to be notified if you don't have a, set of paperwork in order for them to, have some guidance. So by law, we pay your spouse unless there is a notarized spousal consent. Absolutely. So how do you find out who your beneficiary is? For starters, this week, check your mailbox. Your annual member statement actually shows your beneficiary designation, so that's step one. You can log in to a self-service account and either create one or reset your password if you can't remember, and your beneficiary is available through your self-service account, so that's part two. If you have an appointment this afternoon for a small group meeting, we're actually going to tell you who your beneficiary is as part of the service we provide. You can email us. You can call us, and so there are lots of ways to figure out who your beneficiary is. Now the next question is, for me personally, does anyone need a beneficiary? Because I would like to volunteer my services. No? No? I bet you could find a huge room full of volunteers, right? Yeah? Yeah, no, it's kind of a big deal. So we want you to make sure you keep your beneficiary's designation current. It's very important to us. So, any questions on beneficiary information? Excellent. On page 12, we talk about contributions. I assume it's a sign of the economy that members are calling and emailing Tricia and myself and asking if there's a way for them to decrease what is coming out of their paycheck to PERA. And unfortunately, that answer is no. What we all pay in is based on our plan and based on a statutory regulation. That is not flexible unless the legislature makes changes to the contribution rates, and I just sincerely doubt they're going to ask us to contribute less to a fund that they're trying to shore up. So the contribution rates we'll go over in just a minute, but your contributions that come out of your biweekly paycheck actually deposit into a bucket tied to your Social Security number, and you can watch it grow in your self-service account. And the only way it changes is every 2 weeks when your employer sends us your new payroll reportings, and every June 30th when PERA pays interest on your account. The interest rate is set by the board. It is currently 2%, and that pays out every June 30th, and it's the main reason we send you an annual member statement to show you how your account is doing. Members who did not understand how PERA works would contact us in 2008 when the stock market started to decline, and they would call up one day and say, what is in my account today? And then the market would decline, and they call us up the next day and say, what's in my account today? And the numbers were the same because there was not a payroll posting between those 2 days. And so it was very clear to me back then that people didn't understand what type of retirement account they have with us. Your account only changes in 2 ways: biweekly deposits and interest. So that's lovely to know. When I left my very first PERA-related employer, which as you now know was the city of Albuquerque, the HR ladies, who I very much love still to this day, actually told me to beg, borrow, or steal, never to touch my PERA retirement account. And I'm fairly positive, because I was a civilian at the police department, that they were not encouraging me to steal. They were actually trying to impress upon me the importance of having a retirement account in the future. And they don't live in New Mexico for the most part anymore, but if I ever run into them again in their various locations, I'm going to grab them and kiss them on the lips for giving me such wise words of advice. Not everyone gets those words of wisdom. Every day, Tricia and I take inquiries from members who want to know how to get the money out of their account because they see dollar signs and zeros. And so refunds are covered on the bottom portion of page 12. And so I will tell you this. The only way to access the money in your account is by 2 means. You either quit your job, stay separated from any PERA-related employment for a minimum of 30 days, at which point you can request a refund or a rollover of your contributions. If you elect to take a refund of your contributions, the balance in your bucket is subject to 20% in federal tax, 8.5% in state of New Mexico tax, and if you're under the age of 59 and a half, the IRS is going to impose a 10% penalty on the balance in your account. And so I recommend don't do it. If you have any other options, do not touch the money in your account, mostly because it's tied to the service credit. We all swear up and down if we leave somewhere that we're never going to work for that county, city, state, whatever it is, ever again. And then about 75% of us come back. And then we regret taking out that service credit. And so, you know, if you had hindsight when you were trying to make those decisions, or foresight, it would be really great, but it doesn't always work out that way. I'm very grateful I listened, but don't do it. Trish and I joke and tell you to cross this section of your book out, but we just encourage you not to do it. Pages 14 and 15. So I spoke earlier about the different plans and the contribution rates, and so now we're going to talk about which plan you actually fall under. Hopefully you brought a writing utensil or you have some way to mark the booklet. So we're going to start on the upper left-hand corner of page 14. Everyone who works for the state, regardless of the division or department, is part of State General Plan 3. Everyone who works for the city of Las Cruces or Doña Ana County that are not police or fire work for Municipal Plan 3. If you are with the Mesilla Valley Housing Authority, you are Municipal Plan 2. And I just realized now, who am I skipping? Did I miss anybody else? I didn't see the rest of the sign-in list. Anybody else on this page? Any other civilian, non-police, non-fire employees in the room? City, county, state, housing authority? Do we have anyone from the Elephant Butte Irrigation District? No? Yes, state employees are State General Plan 3, the very first one in the list. Okay, so police members of the City of Las Cruces and the Doña Ana County Sheriff's Department are part of Police Plan 5 on page 15. And certified fire members of Fire Plan or City of Las Cruces and Doña Ana County are part of Fire Plan 5. So if you're a secretary at the fire department or the police department, you're part of Municipal Plan 3. Only the sworn officers, certified firefighters are part of Police and Fire Plans 5. Let's see, did I miss anybody? Okay, I think we got everybody covered. Excellent. So, as I mentioned earlier, each of these plans has a statutory set of rules and regs. The employees' contributions, as we are all aware, changed for our municipal members last July 1st. You all started paying 1.5% more of your gross salary into your retirement bucket if you made more than $20,000 annually. State employees had already been doing that for several years prior, so there really wasn't a change for us. It was status quo. And so the plan actually shows you what you are contributing in terms of your gross salary. Never overtime, very rarely things that are considered to be incentives. If you are paid longevity biweekly, that counts. If you get a temporary supervisory increase, para can be deducted from that and it'll count towards your retirement earnings. But very few other things count besides your base hours every 2 weeks. The employer's contribution percentage does not go to your bucket at PERA. It goes to the general fund bucket, and the employers technically started contributing 0.4% more effective this July to the retirement bucket, and you see the note at the bottom of the page for each of those. All of the employers' contribution rates for all of these plans increased 0.4%. And so, your percentage goes into your bucket, employer's percentage goes into the general fund bucket. As I mentioned earlier, if you take a refund, only your bucket is eligible for refund. The employer's portion is never refundable. The only way to benefit from their contribution to our retirement fund on your behalf is to officially draw a lifetime retirement from us, because after your bucket is all paid out, para is going to move on to the employer's fund and their investments as a whole to sustain you for the rest of your lifetime. Pension factor is the next column for each of your plans, and so each of our plans has a set multiplier for your years and months of service. Our Tier 2 members took a 0.5% reduction in their pension factor, so if you're looking at somebody sitting next to you and they have a Tier 2 book, their pension factor multipliers are going to be different than the ones in your book. The pension factor, the way to translate that to English is we're going to take the percentage represented in that column and multiply it by your years and months of service credit when we are ready to retire you, or when you're ready to be retired and we make that calculation on your behalf. Something came about in the 2013 legislative session that talks about blended pension, and Tricia's going to talk to you about that later. But if you are planning to switch from a higher multiplier plan to a lower multiplier plan now, it could have an interesting impact on your retirement, and Tricia will go over that in more detail a little bit later. But I have to tell you, the word pension factor doesn't make a lot of sense to people when we try to tell you what it is. Other retirement systems actually call it an annual multiplier, which makes way better sense to me. And so if you think about it in those terms, we're taking your annual service credit and multiplying it by that percentage. If you're in a 3% plan, essentially you're earning 0.25% for every month you get up and go to work. And so at the end of the year, all 12 of those quarters add up to 1 year of service credit. And so if you need incentive to get out of bed in the morning, you have to go to work and earn your quarter so you can retire sooner, right? Absolutely. So any questions about the first handful of columns that you see on the page here? Last year's legislative session brought about a change regarding to the plan maximum. Most of our members that are Tier 1 can retire either after 20 years if they're police or fire, or 25 years if they're part of the municipal plans. And so lots of our members talk about the old plan maximums. How do I get to the old plan maximum? And Para's formal calculation was not changed in the 2013 legislative session officially. And so the way to get to the old plan max, your 80%, if your plan 3 is still to work 26 years and 8 months. 75% comes about at 25 years if you're Tier 1. To get to the new 90% under state plan or municipal plan 3 now takes 30 years. And I know you're all looking at me like I grew a third eye. How can you expect me to work 30 years? But I met somebody at the state who was on her 32nd year. And I asked her her secret. I said, well, what on earth is possessing you to keep coming to work? Because she was still working when she was topped out at 80% before the rules were even changed. And she said, it's a funny thing, sweetheart. You'll never believe it. And I said, well, try me because I need a good story for my retirement seminar. And so she said, once I got to 25 years, I thought, I'm too young to retire. I'll just push on until I get to 80. And when she got to 80, she said that it was funny because people stopped making her mad. And so she said, I'm going to continue to go to work until people start making me mad, and then I can just retire the next day. I just won't come back. I'll retire. And so apparently that's the secret. You have to get to retirement eligibility, and then it gets easier to go to work. So I keep that in the back of my mind. And so, there's a secret for everyone. But we have more than a handful of members who have exceeded 90%. There's somebody we're meeting with this afternoon who their final calculation was either 94 or 95%. So it can be done. It's just a matter of, do you want to do it? No one at Para is saying you have to get to 90%. What we are saying is, if you don't have a hot date that you're running off to, you don't have another job lined up, you don't have something else that you want to do or need to do somewhere else, if you stick around a little bit longer, you can get a much richer retirement benefit. And so that is there for you. To get to to get to 90% under Police Plan 5 or Fire Plan 5, it will take you 25 years and 9 months. If you are still looking for the 80%, it's technically 22 years, 11 months, even though most academies sold it as 2210. And so that is pretty much those pages. If you are Tier 2 and you are part of Municipal Plan 3, it'll take you 36 years to get to 90%. If you are Tier 2 Municipal Plan 2, it'll take you 45 years to get to 90%. So remember to hug the Tier 2 person sitting next to you. No, just kidding. Don't invade their personal space. But just remember, it could take a while to get there. So any questions about this? You know what I skipped? Is there anyone here from the corrections facility here in Las Cruces, like the state correctional facility? No? Okay. I just wanted to make sure I didn't skip a plan. All right, so I think this is where our handbooks part separate ways. So we're up to page 16. Absolutely.
So being a state plan, 20 years,
So the question was, based on the annual multiplier and years of service. And this is going to be something that Trisha's going to talk about a little bit later in the presentation. He asked, am I going to receive 60%? And the answer is yes, because it would be 3% based on his state employment as a Tier 1 member multiplied by 20 years of service, which is what gives us 60%. For every additional year you're willing to work beyond that, as a Tier 1 member, you get 3%. So it's absolutely doable, and it can be to your benefit. So we are up to page 16 in both the green and purple book. So we talk about earning service credit in both of these books. Before I explain the requirements for earning service credit, I just need to take a quick survey. Is there anyone in this room who works between 20 and 29 hours a week? So less than 30. Okay, and you're a para member? Yes. Okay, just making sure. Okay, so I'm going to cover the date portion of service credit, and then I will explain the salary requirements of service credit after I ask one more question for you. So were you vested with para as of June 30th of 2014, sorry. You had more than 5 years a few months ago? Okay, then I will explain all 3 rules. So, first piece of the puzzle. How many of us remember our hire date? If you're not raising your hand, you've been working too long. Let's be honest. So, all right. Hire date is really important to para. When we are auditing your file for service credit purposes, if you began employment on or prior to the 16th day of the month, service credit requirement has been met for the first month in terms of Part 1. Part 2, for everyone who was vested as of June 30th, 2014, the salary requirements are that you have to be paid a minimum of 80 hours worth of salary every month from your first to your last in order to retain service credit. If you are not vested as of June 30th in 2014, please see Tricia or myself after, and we will explain your service credit requirements because they changed July 1st of this year. Officially, Part 3 is the date you give up your day job, by choice, by force, whatever it is. And so, if you give up your day job before the 15th day of the month, para is not going to give you any service credit for that month, even if you were paid for 80 hours. If you gave up your day job on the 14th, you got paid 80 hours, you don't meet the third piece of the puzzle, which is being on payroll through the 15th day of the month as a minimum. Lots of members come to me and they say, well, what if I give up my day job on December 15th? Will I meet the requirements for service credit for para's purposes? And the first thing I say is, it depends, because everybody loves that answer. It has to do with being paid the 80 hours. And so you want to make sure that you look at your payroll calendars and make sure you're going to earn 80 hours through that date. The reason I don't encourage members to give up their day job on the 15th day of the month, particularly for retirement purposes, is because para is going to pay retirement on the last business day of the month of your effective retirement date. And so for a lot of people, there's a gap between the last time you're on your employer's payroll and the first time para issues a pension payment to you by direct deposit. For somebody who gives up their day job on December 15th that got paid their 80 hours, they've met our requirements, they're going to get service credit. But they have to wait out the rest of December because para's not going to put you on our retiree roster until January 1st. In turn, we're not going to pay you till the last business day of January. So for our members who give up their day job December 31st of 14, they're going to be our retiree January 1st of 15, but we're not going to pay them until January 31st. So that's kind of a big gap between the last payroll from your employer and the first deposit from PERA. And that's provided there are no complications or you don't have any service credit with the Educational Retirement Board. So when members come to me and they say, well, I'm looking at retiring in December, I tell them, you need to pick the date that's as late in the month as you can possibly be on payroll. And you honestly have to work with your employers to determine what that is. Some employers prefer that you get off of payroll on the end of a pay period. Some prefer the last Friday of the month. Some will let you be on payroll through the last calendar day in the month. And that's just something you have to work out with your employer. When members come to me and they say, what is another reason I wouldn't want to give up my day job on the 15th? A lot of it has to do with insurance. If you are a state of New Mexico employee, your insurance, Your insurance coverage with the state is going to end on your last day of employment. If you give up your day job on December 15th, you're potentially going to go 2 weeks without any insurance because retiree health care doesn't let you join their program until you're officially a para-retiree. And so you have to be very careful because the dates are really important. If you are not a member of retiree health care and you have to find insurance elsewhere, that might not be an issue for you, but you want to keep the payroll information in mind because you don't want a humongous gap between your last employer's payment to you and your first payroll from PERA. So, any questions about service credit? Earlier I alluded to members taking leave without pay or being injured on the job or taking family medical leave. 2.5 years ago, I went on family medical leave to give birth to our youngest daughter, who is now 2.5, and she is hilarious. She would have come here today if I would have let her. She wanted to get in my suitcase. And so, I made sure that para had enough leave balances in my buckets. Obviously, I earned them, but I made sure there were enough leave balances in my bucket to make sure that para paid me a minimum of 20 hours each of the 12 weeks I was out on family medical leave so that I didn't have to come back at the end of my career and make up those 3 months worth of service credit. Family medical leave is a really great benefit. It will allow you to take off 12 weeks without pay. But if you do that, those might be months you have to make up at the end of your career. Oftentimes our members get injured on the job and they take advantage of the workers' compensation benefits, which is a really great federal benefit. The problem is para contributions cannot be deducted from the workers' compensation portion of what is paid to you. And so if you are on workers' comp more than 2 weeks in any given month, there's a chance that you could have donut holes in your service credit. So we just encourage you before you give up your day job and tell your coworkers and your supervisors what you think of them, that you actually make sure your service credit with PERA is, it doesn't have the donut holes, or you made up that time, or you purchased time to fill in those holes. Yes, sir.
Quick question.
Sure.
So what if you're missing 2 or 3 hours of leave without pay that isn't covered by FMLA or some other?
So the question is, what if you took some leave, but not all of it was covered, and you had a handful of hours that were not covered, 2 or 3? And so, as we mentioned earlier, the service credit requirements, para is just looking to see, did you have 80 hours in any one given month? So it has to do with the month as a whole, not particularly 2 or 3 hours here. If you're a full-time employee and you experienced the furlough days that the state and some of the cities and counties did, those furlough days were 8 hours here and there. No one had a negative impact on their service credit unless they were part-time. And then para's board took emergency action to make sure part-time employees would not be affected by those furlough days. So as long as that was the only time the employees were absent from work in terms of leave without pay, para made their service credit whole. So 1 or 2 hours, 3 hours, 5 hours, probably not a big deal. Just depends on whether or not you met the 80-hour requirement for the month as a whole. So, you can always contact us after you have a look at your annual member statement for the period in question and let us know if there's a hiccup in your file. So, all right. Any questions about service credit? Because you didn't have any and I still gave you more information. Oh, so his question's about retiree health care. The bad news is para staff cannot talk to you about any of the insurance. In the back side of the handbook, there is contact information for not only retiree health care, but also the Educational Retirement Board and Social Security. So we give you all of their contact information. When you visit Retiree Healthcare's website, you'll be able to find their current rates and all of their enrollment forms, as well as their contact information. So unfortunately, we cannot speak on their behalf or cover any of their topics per se. So, all right. So absolutely. We're still on page 16 in the purple book. We're going to skip over to page 18 in the green book. So, Members who did not get the wise words of wisdom I received at the beginning of my career about not touching the contributions in my account now have the opportunity, when they return to para-employment again, to purchase something known as withdrawn service credit. That means you worked for a para-related agency, you left, you took out your bucket of contributions, and now you're back working, regretting that previous decision, more than likely. And so withdrawn service credit can be purchased at any time in your career once you have obtained para or ERB-related employment. You will see there on pages 16 and 18 that there is a bulleted list covering the interest rates for what para is going to charge you to reinstate your service credit. As you can see, the interest rates have changed over time, but honestly, the longer you wait to buy your time, the more expensive it's going to get. And so if you have some time that you took out previously, we'll tell you how to request the cost. There's no smarter way to buy your time than using your deferred compensation account. It is officially National Save for Retirement Week, which is why Linda Miller is not sitting in here with us today. She is out in the hallway trying to encourage people to save more for retirement. But that retirement account can help you get to retirement sooner, even, right now. If you have a deferred compensation account, you can use the money in that account as a direct rollover so you don't pay any taxes or penalties to help you buy your time with PERA. Withdrawn service credit, as I mentioned, can be purchased the second you return to para-related employment. Maybe not the second, because there's a processing time for the paperwork. But once you return, you can inquire about the cost of reinstating that service and use your deferred compensation account to help you pay. There are some minimums that are involved with purchasing that time. Para does not allow you to buy your withdrawn service credit in less than yearly increments unless you took out less than a year prior. And so if you took out 5 years, just as an example, you can buy those years 1 year at a time as you can afford them, or you can buy all 5 years at once if you have enough money saved or you hit the lottery, I don't know, something along those lines. And so withdrawn service is the only one that has that yearly increment as a minimum. There are additional types of service credit covered on pages 17 and 19 that we're going to go over now. Airtime, officially. How many of us have heard the term airtime? For those of you who have not, it literally comes from taking service credit out of thin air, adding it to your retirement bucket, and it can speed up your retirement by up to 1 year. You do have to be vested to purchase airtime. Airtime, the cost is based on 4 factors. It's based on your age at the time of purchase, the amount of service credit in your bucket at the time of purchase, the plan you contribute under, and the average of your high 36 consecutive months of salary if you're Tier 1, or high 60 consecutive months of salary if you are Tier 2. Everyone in this room has a different birth date. Every one of us is at a different place in our service credit. Every one of us makes a different salary. That means every one of us would have a different cost for airtime. So basing your decision to buy airtime on the person sitting next to you, probably not a good idea. Basing airtime purchase decisions on, well, my buddy did it, I should probably do it too, not a great idea. Airtime is actually one of the few things that I encourage people to purchase. I don't encourage them to purchase it because airtime is completely non-refundable and very few of us have a crystal ball. We can't see far into the future about what that future is going to bring. Am I going to buy myself out of retirement now, not knowing, what the future is going to hold for me? And so I tell people to look at it this way. For me, I was hired by Para on February 28th, many moons ago. And so if I were to sit down and look at my annual member statement, it's not really a clear picture of how much service credit I need to buy. But if I were to sit down and look at my self-service account, I could see that the year I was hired by PERA, I don't have a full year's worth of service credit. And so I'm actually missing 2 months to make my first year whole, January and February. So if anything, I should probably consider buying 2 months of airtime to make my first year whole. Does that make sense? Essentially, my service credit starts in March because I was hired February 28th, and so to make my first calendar year whole, I'd have to buy January and February. Is it actually January and February? No, it's just 2 months of service credit added to my bucket to help make my service credit whole at the end of every year. But that's the little picture. If we were to take into consideration all of the service credit that I have right now, technically as of June, at the end of June, I have 15 and a half years of service credit right now. And so buying 2 months isn't going to make that picture any better. And so I encourage people before they buy airtime to get in touch with us, or at the very least look at their self-service account so they can kind of figure out what is going to be best for their retirement scenario. So that was a lot. Airtime can be purchased in monthly increments, 1 month at a time as you can afford it. It is completely non-refundable, and unfortunately it's the most expensive of all the different types of service credit members can purchase. Military service credit is on page 20 in the green book, and I assume page 18 in the purple book. And so, military cost, did I say 20? It's 19. I lied, it's 18 in the green book. I'm so bad today. Military service credit is on page 16 still in the purple book. And so, for those of us who served active duty military prior to employment, thank you first and foremost for your service to our country. It is truly appreciated. Those individuals who meet that qualification have the ability to purchase their military service credit toward their retirement. It has to be active duty, so guard time doesn't count, and you have to be able to produce a DD-214 form with your discharge status, or if your tour of duty was less than 90 days, your orders with the dates and your discharge status. And so, officially, military time is less expensive than airtime. It can also be less expensive than withdrawn time. And so the cost is based on 3 factors, and I've already kind of touched base on all of them. The first is the employee contribution rate for the plan that you are enrolled in, the employer contribution rate for the plan you're enrolled in, and the average of your high 36 consecutive months of salary if you're Tier 1, high 60 if you are Tier 2. And so that calculation, the way to give yourself a rough estimate, is to take your gross monthly salary and then multiply it by the employee and employer contribution rates we looked at on pages 14 and 15, add the two together, and you will give yourself a rough monthly cost for your military service. Before you write to para and say, okay, I'd like to know, we will absolutely confirm that for you if you submit a written request to us, but we do need your military orders or DD-214 form. All right. Any questions about the service credit types we've covered so far? Yes, sir.
Can you buy your military time with an automatic deduction from your paycheck on a monthly basis?
Excellent question. Can you purchase military or any other type of service credit by making biweekly payments out of your paycheck? And the answer is no. For those of you who have been around for a while, para used to allow that, but then members would switch employers and not tell us, or they would quit, and then we'd have this contract that was partially paid, and so it never really worked out. A handful of people completed their contracts perfectly, but we got stuck with a whole bunch of money that we couldn't apply, and it was a nightmare. So when you are purchasing service credit with PERA, you have to pay us for the minimum increment all in one payment. So for military and airtime, 1 month is the minimum increment for those purchases, and as we discussed, withdrawn service, the minimum increment is 1 year. Did that answer your question? Yeah, it wasn't the answer you were looking for, but it was the answer.
So in theory, if I want to buy 4 years, you have to take a second mortgage out on my house and buy it.
No, you don't have to take a second mortgage out. You should have started deferred comp at the beginning of your career. The good news is it's never too late, and Linda Miller with deferred comp is going to come up and speak to you in just a moment. It's a matter of what you can afford, what you're willing to do. Some people do take out a second mortgage or a personal loan to make their purchases happen, but there is not a smarter way to buy your time other than deferred comp, because you're not only using your money in the account, but also federal and state tax dollars to help you buy your time. So, was there another question on this side? Yes, ma'am.
You just answered that. I was going to ask if you could use deferred comp to buy airtime or whatever.
Okay, so I answered the question before it was asked, having to do with purchasing your service credit with your deferred compensation account. So that is absolutely something you can do. So, excellent. Okay, any other questions related to purchasing time? No. All right, so I am on page 19 in the purple book, and we are back to page 20 in the green book. So, for the members who did not get the opportunity to pre-register for this afternoon, or they are interested in purchasing any of the types of service credit we covered today, Officially, there is a form in your handbook, and you technically don't have to tear the book apart. You can see Tricia or myself after the presentation. It's on 45 in the purple book, 47 in the green book. This form is Para's request form. This form can get you all of the answers you need. And so, what's really imperative for us is that you actually fill out all of the boxes between the two darkened lines at the top of the form. If we set out a stack of request forms here, most people go through and they check off all the boxes of all the things they heard about today, and then they scribble their signature on the bottom, but they forget to tell us who they are and where to send our written response. And then those go right into the recycle bin, and you never get an answer. And so, we encourage you to fill out a request form if you are interested in purchasing time. But, you know, the online calculator for airtime is a great way. I kind of talked you through calculating military time, and there were some examples in the handbook for you. Withdrawn service is pretty much the only one you can't estimate, but if you submit a request, we can absolutely help you with that. For those of you who did not get into the small group meetings, there's a way to request the information we're giving out this afternoon, and it involves the second checkbox on the para request form. If you are within 3 years of retirement eligibility, and I realize we haven't taught that to you yet, you actually have the ability to request an estimate of benefits from para. And so it's part of our timeline. When you're within 3 years, we tell you you should look into it. A year out, you should look into it, and so on and so forth. And so Tricia's going to cover that with you here in just a little bit. The previous couple of pages are also our beneficiary form, our beneficiary spousal consent form, and if you don't get your annual member statement this week, there's a good chance we don't have a good address on file for you, and you can use the form on either page 43 or 45 to update your address with us. So it isn't super complicated. The forms are pretty straightforward. The boxes are asking you things you know, like your name and your address and your phone number. So if you have any questions, by all means, don't hesitate to ask. We're here to help. So I believe I am officially going to answer one last question, and then I'm going to turn the floor over to Linda Miller, and she's going to talk to you about deferred compensation. So yes, sir.
So if you're working part-time 20 hours a week,
Okay.
and then you get a full-time job,
Okay.
how does that affect the retirement requirements, you know, the number of years of service and pension?
Okay, so the question is, if I am currently classified as a part-time employee, and at some point between now and the time I retire, I take a position that would classify me as full-time, how does that affect my retirement? And so the answer is, as long as we are talking about somebody who was vested as of June 30th, 2014, officially, the answer is, the only thing that you're changing in terms of your retirement account or retirement status is when para calculates your final average salary, we will have more than 80 hours every month to calculate your high 36 consecutive months of salary. And so, you know, it is to your benefit to consider a full-time employment change. If you don't, we're still going to look